We will begin by studying entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is the pivotal concept around which all economic science revolves. If we do not grasp the concept, nature and characteristics of entrepreneurship, we cannot possibly grasp anything in economics. As I was explaining to you the other day, economics is the science that studies the processes of creation and transmission of entrepreneurial knowledge. The processes of communicating the information human beings generate when they act. This is a special type of knowledge which has distinctive characteristics and is transmitted or communicated in a certain way through market processes. This communication takes place spontaneously, without anyone directing it from above. We will be astonished by the effects of this. Furthermore, understanding the very entrepreneurial nature of human beings is vital for each and every one of us. Let us embark on this now. We will begin by looking at a broad, general concept of entrepreneurship. And then, little by little, we will narrow it down and make it more precise, more detailed, more operational. But we will start with the broad, general concept. In a broad sense, we could say that entrepreneurship coincides with human action itself. In other words, every human being, every man, every woman, every one of us, when we act in any area where we pursue our interests, attempts to modify the circumstances that surround us today and achieve others which we consider more valuable tomorrow. We attempt to achieve the ends or goals that are valuable to us. Whenever we do this, whenever we act, we exercise entrepreneurship. I can understand that it comes as a bit of a shock, particularly during the first lessons, that I identify the notion of action with that of entrepreneurship. In fact, when we speak of an enterprise or an entrepreneur, we automatically associate that idea with a specific institution in the market, a business firm, a company that sells certain goods or services, etc. However, we are starting out with a much broader and more general concept of entrepreneurship. Even if this new general idea of entrepreneurship seems unfamiliar to us at first when we equate it with the idea of human action, the view of enterprise as action is time-honored and has a long tradition behind it. Let us consider it. Etymologically, enterprise in English, or empresa in Spanish, derives from the Latin verb ineprendo, prendi, prensum, which means to discover, to see, to perceive, to realize something we had been unaware of before, to seize, like a person catching a fly. This Latin root has also entered other continental Romance languages. For example, in French, entrepreneur has the same etymological origin as empresario in Spanish. Ineprendo, prendi, prensum. Indeed, in France, the term entrepreneur arose as far back as the late Middle Ages, and it was used to refer to people in charge of carrying out weighty tasks. Connected either with war or with the construction of the most important public buildings of the time. By the way, what were the most important public buildings in the Middle Ages in Europe? The cathedrals. So the master builders were called entrepreneurs. At the time, they were a sort of cross between architects and building contractors. They knew how to draw. They had their secrets and passed down their knowledge from fathers to sons. They were responsible for those magnificent projects, for the construction of cathedrals, those historic monuments. We have many of them in Spain: the Burgos Cathedral, the Segovia Cathedral, the Avila Cathedral, the Sevilla Cathedral. The burgomasters who had this last one built said, "Let us build such a cathedral that those who visit it in the future will exclaim, 'The people who set out to construct this building were crazy.'" It took decades, centuries to build a cathedral. In fact, back then, life expectancy was very short, and the one who started the project might die 10 or 20 years later, and so his son would have to take over, and then his grandson, until at the end of 100 or 150 years, the project came to fruition. Entrepreneurs in France were the people in charge of building cathedrals. In another Romance language very close to Spanish, Portuguese, empreiteiro, an entrepreneur. In Portugal, an empreiteiro is still, even today, a builder. Not long ago, I was responsible for a building project in Portugal, and one day someone came up to me and said, "The empreiteiro has just arrived," and it was the builder. Imagine that. In Portugal, even nowadays, the meaning originally attached to the term entrepreneur in France still survives. Over the years, in France, entrepreneur came to mean what it now means in English, and what empresario now means in Spanish, in any area in which this person conducts his or her activities. Do you know what the most widely used language is today, in the commercial and trade sector, and in the world of science and technology? By far the most common language used for communication, whether between German people and Spanish people and Italian people and French people. Even the French use it, much to their chagrin, because they're very proud of their language and reluctant to accept another, but they have no choice. What is the international language? English! There is no doubt about it. Just as the international language in the Middle Ages, the one all educated Europeans used to communicate, regardless of their country of origin, was Latin. Why has English triumphed? Over the course of this class, we will devote a significant amount of time to studying the spontaneous emergence of social institutions. In any sphere, in the sphere of language, like we are discussing now regarding the development of the term entrepreneur and its meaning. In the sphere of law, in the sphere of morality, which derives from the Latin word mos moris, meaning tradition. In the sphere of economics, institutions like money, law, property, market, exchange. We will see that the life of a human being depends on institutions which are simply patterned behaviors we learn to adopt automatically, without being able to identify the concrete social function they fulfill. They incorporate a huge volume of information, great wisdom, because they have formed little by little as a result of the contributions over many generations of countless human beings. If you pick up Cicero's treatise, De Republica, you will find that he quotes the great Cato, who declares that Roman law is markedly superior to that of other peoples because it is, and I quote, "not due to the personal creation of one man, like Solon in Athens or Lycurgus in Sparta, but of very many. It has not been founded during the lifetime of any particular individual, but through a series of centuries and generations in Rome." This is the idea I am now referring to concerning language. English is the language par excellence in all spheres, because it is basically a free language. There is no Royal Academy of the English language. English emerges and evolves through the participation of all those who speak it, and the term entrepreneur provides us with a very handy example. In fact, there did not used to be a word for entrepreneur in English. If we pick up economics books from the 18th and beginning of the 19th centuries, we find that none of those authors had a word for entrepreneur. Sometimes they used merchant. Other times they used adventurer. Adventurer. As you can see, these terms reflect part of the meaning of entrepreneur, but they do not hit the nail square on the head. In other places we find the word undertaker, but unfortunately that brings to mind death and funerals. So there was no adequate term. Well, in the English-speaking world, if there is no appropriate word on hand, a word is simply borrowed. A word is just taken from another language, and immediately it becomes part of the heritage of the English language. This is exactly what happened with the term entrepreneur. Today it is written just the same in English as in French. If you look in any standard English dictionary, Webster's or the Oxford English Dictionary for example, you will find the word entrepreneur, with the same meaning in English as in French, and with the same meaning as empresario in Spanish. English speakers simply took entrepreneur straight from French.
Al empresario.
Spanish. Our magnificent Spanish language is, with great difficulty, holding on to second position in the world. With great difficulty, despite state intervention and the Royal Academy of the Spanish language, etc., because fortunately, through certain great historical achievements which we will discuss later, our language spread to the American continent, and the Americas are absolutely full of enthusiasm, resources, and spontaneity. Each region with its own distinctive characteristics. The same is true in Spain, Andalusia, Castilla, Galicia, Catalonia, etc. If we open the dictionary of the Spanish Royal Academy and we look up empresa, enterprise in English, we will find that the fourth meaning of empresa is literally action. This is just the point I am making. In this introduction, I am defining entrepreneurship and enterprise as an action. It is true that it is the fourth meaning, not the first, nor the second, nor the third, but the fourth meaning of empresa reads, an arduous and difficult action valiantly undertaken. So, ma'am, does this apply to what you have just started? You are very concerned because you are thinking, what am I getting myself into? I'm a second-year undergraduate, and they told me in this class that teaching is going to be at doctorate level. So then, what you are now beginning is an action, and an arduous one, because it is going to be very difficult. And you are embarking on it with courage and enthusiasm. Am I right? Well, we are all involved in this enterprise, dear students. The enterprise of launching this course, of learning together, of filling our toolbox with new concepts, and of learning, with the professor's help, how to use them to understand and interpret the economic events that occur around us. The evolution of the term empresa, with its current meaning of action, has taken centuries in Spain. And in fact, if we go back 400 or 500 years, the term empresa in Spain referred to specific or concrete actions of great importance. To be more precise, the word empresa was used to refer to the insignia that appeared on the shield of certain orders of knighthood, so that everyone who saw a knight knew that he had committed himself under oath to embark on and complete an important action. Indeed, during the Middle Ages in Spain, people paid attention to the insignias displayed on knights' shields as they communicated vital information. The most valiant actions the Spanish were determined to perform in that era basically revolved around the reconquest. Let us see what the brilliant Cervantes has to say in the first part of his immortal work, specifically chapter 2. About Don Quixote I read, "But scarcely did he find himself upon the open plain." Think of Don Quixote, who has just decided to become a knight-errant and has left his house. We read that he had just gone through the gate when a terrible thought struck him. A terrible thought. One all but enough to make him abandon the enterprise, empresa, at the very outset. Look at that, just what we are talking about today. Cervantes uses the word empresa to indicate the project, the valiant action Don Quixote is embarking on. It occurred to him that he had not been dubbed a knight, and that according to the law of chivalry, he neither could nor ought to bear arms against any knight, and that even if he had been, still he ought, as a novice knight, to wear white armour without a device, empresa, upon the shield. Cervantes is referring to those insignias that were displayed on shields to show that a man was a knight and that he had committed himself, that he had sworn to launch and complete a brave action, without a device, empresa, upon the shield, until by his prowess he had earned one. I love that in the first lesson of this economics course we can draw on a quote from Cervantes. To sum up, I have identified the concept of entrepreneurship with the concept of human action. But if we go back to the etymological origin of entrepreneurship, it becomes clear that we are talking about an enterprising action. That is, as we can see from the meaning of the term in Latin, an action that consists of seeking. That consists of discovering. That consists of creating. Notice, as we will see, that there is no economic difference between creating and discovering. From the viewpoint of economics, from the viewpoint of the information or knowledge that is transmitted, it is the same thing to discover America as it is to create it. You're probably thinking, how absurd! The American continent was there. Christopher Columbus didn't create it, he discovered it. No. From the standpoint of economics, information and knowledge, Christopher Columbus discovered and created the New World because, prior to that discovery, it did not exist as a concept. In economic terms, discover and create are synonyms. They mean to realize something one had been unaware of before. This truth captures the purest, most intimate essence of entrepreneurship, to realize something we were unaware of before. This is what entrepreneurial discovery is all about. And we can trace it all back to the Latin etymological origin, in emprendo, prendi, prensum. Apprehender in Spanish, to seize something. We have asked, what is entrepreneurship? And we have equated it with the concept of human action and explained its etymological origin. But what is human action? Well, we already have an idea: to discover, seize, realize. But in scientific terms, we will define human action as all deliberate behavior or conduct. We need not repeat that it must be human behavior carried out by a human being. That is to say, apes do not act entrepreneurially. Despite claims to the contrary, animals do not act. They do not act in the sense that we human beings act. We could certainly make an anthropomorphic interpretation of animal behavior as if animals acted. Almost everyone has had a dog. Dogs get so happy when they see us. They jump for joy. Man's best friend. They are practically our intimate companions. We talk to them. It seems like they answer. But there is an enormous fundamental difference between animal behavior and human action. And it is that dogs are still doing what they were doing 50,000 or 100,000 years ago. In contrast, human beings have not ceased to entrepreneurially create new ideas. We have put a man on the moon. We have composed Beethoven's Ninth Symphony and Schubert's Unfinished Symphony. And we have advanced civilization in ways we could not have imagined a short time ago. Neither is the behavior of a sleepwalker human action. You all know what a sleepwalker does. He is sleeping. He suddenly gets up. He goes to the refrigerator. He pours himself a glass of milk. Still asleep, he goes out onto the balcony, climbs up onto the roof, goes into the neighbor's house, does who knows what with the neighbor, climbs back out and into bed again, and still sound asleep and completely unaware. That is not human action. It is not deliberate conduct. He was asleep, and the next day does not remember a thing. Reflex reactions are not human actions either. If someone taps us here, like doctors do, with their little hammers, our leg goes up. That is not a human action either. Human action must be deliberate behavior or conduct. From an external viewpoint, human action does not require movement that could be observed by an outsider. Sometimes human action can consist of not doing something. I see someone about to fall from the deck of a listing ship, and right below where he's going to fall, there is a shark with an open mouth this big. So I ask the guy who is about to fall, "By the way, do you have life insurance?" And he answers, "Yeah, why?" And I say, "Oh, no reason," and I keep on walking. He falls and the shark eats him. I have plainly committed a human act of omission. This is important. Human actions are not unequivocally observable to an outsider. We will see how this precludes empirical verification in economics. Instead, human actions are only interpretable in subjective terms. So, we have defined human action as all deliberate behavior or conduct. Now, let us consider the elements that comprise this idea of human action with its entrepreneurial content, and we will see that these elements refer to the fundamental concepts of all economic science. Now, the first element of the idea of human action. The first essential element is the concept of an end. The concept of an objective. In English, people say, goal! A goal, in English, is an end or objective. So what the 11 players want, their end, is to get the ball through the goalposts. And when they accomplish that, English speakers say, objective, end. That is the meaning of goal. They scored a goal, means they achieved what they wanted. Because, dear students, the end is what the actor intends to achieve with his or her action. And why do human beings pursue ends or objectives in their lives? Why? Why do we pursue ends? Why do we want to achieve things? This brings us to the second essential element, another fundamental concept of all economic science. It is the concept of value. Value, dear students, we will define as the subjective and more or less psychically intense appreciation that the actor assigns to his end. Listen, we are scientifically studying extremely abstract realities. So it is difficult to find terms which allow us to describe with absolute precision and certainty realities that are there. However, this enormous scientific obstacle which we encounter in economics is one we get around, one we overcome, thanks to a huge advantage we enjoy, an advantage other scientists lack. For economics is the only science in which the scientist shares the same nature as those he or she observes. To put it another way, in physics or in chemistry, the physicist or the chemist does not share the same nature as the phenomena he studies. A nuclear physicist is not an atom. He cannot say to himself, I know what atoms do. An atom gets up in the morning, he gets together with another atom and says, come on, let's fuse together. And we fuse together like so, and this fusion sets off a chain reaction, and voila, an atomic bomb. No. And a chemist is not a molecule, nor is a biologist a liver. He or she cannot say, I know firsthand what a liver is, where a liver's weaknesses lie, and what a liver feels. No. So in the whole world of the natural sciences, there is a sort of wall that divides the phenomenon observed, the plant, the liver, the atom, the molecule, from the observer. For that reason, the observing scientist has to constantly do laboratory experiments and formulate hypotheses and try to verify them, in an attempt to understand, by approximation, something about the natural world. However, in economics, whether you believe it or not, the economic scientist, in this case, me, I am a human being just like you are. Economics is the only science in which the theorist shares the same nature as those he or she observes. And this gives the scientist an enormous advantage, because it gives him first-hand knowledge through introspection, knowledge of the scientific phenomena he is studying. And today, even though it is very difficult and challenging for us to express these highly abstract realities in words, with the restraint our language imposes on us, we are pretty confident, because each and every one of us here understands what an end is, and understands what value is. The truth is that value, as the subjective appreciation we assign to our end, is a very abstract and complex reality, but nevertheless, we know what we are referring to. Value is, above all, subjective. Think about how I have defined it. The subjective appreciation. Notice that there are no suitable terms in Spanish, nor in other languages, for that matter, to refer to value. Appreciation. I have chosen a rough term that incorporates the concept of price. We will talk about prices. All of this I am covering now is to help us understand how prices are determined. We will discuss that a month from now. Anyway, I have little choice of words. I am not going to say, value is the subjective, more or less intense value, because then I would be repeating within the definition the word I wish to define. I have been forced to use. I will tell you, sotto voce, so you understand, a very rough term, appreciation. But everybody understands subjective, more or less intense. It is like a magnet. There are ends that we will do anything to achieve. A mother that wants to save her child. And then there are other ends that we value less, that we appreciate less. I could say, I really like Carmen, but I like Minerva much more. Now, Monica, she is my ideal. These are subjective appreciations, just as with any end a person chooses to pursue. And these appreciations vary in their intensity. Consider the way I have explained this in my example. This appreciation allows us to make comparisons. Values can be compared. I prefer Monica to Minerva, and Minerva to Carmen, for example. And I prefer her infinitely, or I prefer her strongly, or I prefer her slightly, more. But what I cannot say, because I cannot measure value in objective terms, is that to me, Monica is worth 3.141516 times what Minerva is worth. Valuations, as psychic appreciations, are part of the subjective internal world, which is not a world we can measure in quantitative terms. It is not a cardinal world, a world of numbers. It is a world of psychic intensities that permits only comparisons. For instance, I like something a lot more, or a little more, or I like something a lot less, or a little less, but we cannot measure this. Furthermore, we determine value subjectively. What do we mean when we say that value is subjective? This is essential. Everybody take note. When I say that value is subjective, what I am indicating is that it is the subject in question, the person who is acting, who determines the value. This is what subjective means. Thus, value can never be objectively determined by an outside observer. This is key. I repeat, value is subjective, in the sense that it is the subject, this is where the term comes from, subject, subjective, who determines or assesses the value in the context of each action he or she undertakes, but it cannot be measured from the outside in objective terms. Two essential elements of the idea of human action: the concept of an end, or an objective which the actor intends to achieve by his or her action, and the concept of value, which the actor attaches to his or her end. It is precisely with this value in mind that the actor decides to embark on his action and attempt to achieve his end. For example, since I have a thing for Monica, I must do something to win her over, because I have a real thing for her. End value. So I need to do something, to get her attention, to make her fall for me, in short, to lead her up the garden path. This brings us to the third element of the idea of human action, the concept of means. Economists also talk about resources, etc. But for now, we are going to speak of the concept of means. It is much more precise in a terminological sense, and it is much more suited to our purposes. Listen, the means is anything the actor subjectively believes will enable him to accomplish his end. So I start thinking, and I say to myself, okay, my end is to win Monica over. How can I do that? I need means. I could send her a message. I could wear some cologne as an aphrodisiac, and then just by walking by her, I would make her fall madly in love with me. And then, once she is half dazed and paying no heed to my faults, I could say, hey, why don't we go to the disco? Another means. Maybe at the disco, with the help of the music, there are many techniques. I could drop a handkerchief. There are many techniques. I am just a little out of practice. I am a little rusty, but you all know what I mean. So, I look for means that I subjectively believe will help me achieve my end. The means is like a bridge that will take us to the end we are working toward. Do we set value on means? Yes, we also set value on means, via the fundamental economic concept of utility, which is the fourth essential element of the idea of entrepreneurial human action, which we are studying. What is utility? Note that just as value is always tied to the end, the value always corresponds to the final objective, utility is always tied to the means. Utility always refers to the means, never to the end. Utility is also a subjective appreciation, but it is the one the actor assigns to the means, never to the end but to the means, and it will be greater or smaller depending on the value of the end which the actor believes that means will enable him to accomplish. Allow me to repeat this. I discover or create a bit of knowledge I did not have before. It occurs to me that a certain end has enormous value for me. So I must get busy and search for means that will permit me to achieve that end. If I find means, the utility of this means, or of these means, I have discovered or created will be greater for me, the greater the value of the end I believe these means will enable me to accomplish. It is as if the subjective value we assign to the end were projected onto the means, via the concept of utility.
Luego, es como si el valor subjetivo que damos al fin se proyectara en el medio a través del concepto de utilidad.
In this sense, we could say that value and utility are two sides of the same subjective coin, because the actor projects the value of the end onto the means through the concept of utility. Allow me to give you an example. I do this every year. This is all in a day's work for a professor. All right. Can you see what this is? Look. Look at it. Look. How about that? What do you think? Why are you laughing? This is a piece of garbage. Seriously. This is a piece of paper. It is a piece of cellulose with a little ink on it. It's nothing. Why are you laughing? Why are you getting nervous? This is nothing. Why all these comments? Why all this laughter? Why all this nudging? Why the nervousness? Why do people post on YouTube, Professor Huerta de Soto rips up a €10 bill? This is the perfect illustration for today's class. Because each and every one of you, the moment I did this, and you will never forget it, and the class has cost me €10, projected onto the bill what you would do if you had it. And you think, well, with that bill today, since I am short of money, I could pay for my bus fare, and I could have a sandwich, and I could pay the entrance fee to the disco. We all assign utility to the bill as a means to achieve numerous ends. Yours, yours, and mine. And what is the end I have valued today? What end has led me to use this means, which has utility for me? Precisely to communicate to you in class today, through an illustration you will never forget, the concept of utility projected onto the means whenever people act. I have said that the means is subjective. I say to a friend, well, even though I'm a little shy, I'm going to ask Monica to the disco. But my friend says, oh, for crying out loud, nobody does that anymore. Nobody does that. You're out of touch. It's unbelievable. I pay no attention to him. The mere subjective belief on my part that something will enable me to achieve my end is sufficient to turn that something into a means, and thus into an object of study in economics and an object of exchange in the market. Let me provide you with a much more illustrative example. Let us imagine that we are in the middle of a primitive tribe, perhaps of cave dwellers in New Guinea, or a tribe in the middle of the Amazon, hunter-gatherers, for instance, and the chief of the tribe has a son who gets sick. He becomes terribly ill with tonsillitis. At that time, an NGO doctor visits the tribe. She diagnoses the illness and attempts to give the child an injection of antibiotics. However, the chief of the tribe subjectively believes that it is much more efficient to call the witch doctor and ask him to perform some chants and exorcisms around the boy to rid him of the evil spirits that are keeping him bedridden. I offer this example because it might appear to us from the outside that the appropriate, correct means, indeed the only means, is to trust modern medicine and the injection of antibiotics. Nevertheless, if the chief of the tribe is convinced that modern medicine and antibiotics are worthless, and that the exorcisms of the tribe's witch doctor are valuable, the means is the tribe's witch doctor, and not the antibiotics. For we have defined the means as anything the subject, who acts, subjectively believes, regardless of whether the method seems ridiculous or dreadful to us, will permit the achievement of an end. At that moment, the chosen method becomes a means. Another example, if a young woman or a young man, in Italy for instance, where both men and women are particularly elegant, believes that if every night she applies 8 lotions to her face, the next morning she will wake up more beautiful and with fewer wrinkles, it does not matter that in the vast majority of cases this is false. Her belief is sufficient to turn the lotions into means, with their corresponding utility. Her belief also makes these lotions extremely valuable economic goods, which give rise to huge investments, pharmaceutical companies, advertising campaigns, TV commercials. Am I right or not? I repeat, the means is also determined subjectively by the actor, in the context of each action, and its entrance into the economic sphere depends on the subjective valuations of the end, and of the also subjective utility which the actor assigns to his or her means. Means, by definition, and this is the 5th element of the idea of human action, and it is also essential for understanding economics, means, by definition, must be scarce. What do we intend to communicate when we say that means must be scarce? Scarcity is also a subjective concept determined by the actor. What we mean is that the actor believes the means available to him or her are not sufficient to accomplish all the ends the actor is pursuing. Therefore, scarcity, 1, is a subjective concept, and 2, cannot be measured or quantified from the outside. I am going to give you an example. Let us imagine that I have a leather pouch that contains 1 grain of sand from a beach in Japan. Someone could say, that is extremely scarce, because in all of Spain there is only that 1 grain. But if there is no one who subjectively demands or appreciates that grain of sand, it is not scarce. Means which are not scarce are not means. They are not means because the actor does not even take them into account when he or she acts. To put it another way, where there is no scarcity, in subjective terms, there is no human action. Air is absolutely necessary for us to breathe. If someone sealed off this room so that no fresh air could get in, the room would fill up with carbon monoxide and we would die. But right now, as we are performing our actions, I as a professor and you as students taking notes, is anyone concerned about the air? It is simply that none of us subjectively views the air as scarce today, in this historical concept, right now, here in class. We just breathe. We give no thought to the air as an economic good. We just use it. No one is compelled to save air, but circumstances could change. It could be that one of you has eaten fabada, bean stew. You are from Germany. Are you familiar with fabada? Well, you see, this dish tends to be rather heavy to digest, so it increases the probability of a certain disruption of body processes. And if that happens, it is enough to spread a kind of sickly, sweet, disgusting odor through part of the classroom. And the people sitting there, who just a moment ago considered the air an overabundant good and took no account of it when acting, begin to get nervous. Some of them move to another seat, and there are actions. Because now, in this context, air begins to be scarce. In fact, the set of scarce goods is not given, but has constantly changed throughout history. Curiously, it is when a good becomes scarce that it becomes the focus of human entrepreneurship. This is when creativity awakens and the horn of plenty overflows. It is when the process of wealth creation is fruitful. Back when people lived in the caves of Altamira 50,000 years ago in the Spanish region of Cantabria, almost everything in Cantabria was a free good, except for the cave and maybe the women, etc. Everything was overabundant. Water, bison, land. However, if you go to Cantabria today, you will see that absolutely everything is scarce. The land is divided into small farms, and everything is private property. What has happened? During the time of the Altamira caves, there were maybe 500 inhabitants in Cantabria. How many are there today? 1 million. Today, all resources are scarce, but precisely because they are scarce, we have set our ingenuity in motion, and there is much more production and wealth. The standard of living is much higher, and the population is much larger than 50,000 years ago. When we study environmental theory, and we see that the market is what best protects the environment, we will examine this process. The process through which civilization develops is as follows. An ever-increasing number of goods which were not considered scarce before become scarce. They enter the economic sphere. They enter the sphere of needs or allocation in terms of entrepreneurial creativity and property rights through the market process. Goods which are not scarce are called, be sure to take note, free goods, or conditions of human well-being that are given or taken for granted. In any case, people never consider these goods when acting.